Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about my 10 must-have wide receivers that you need for 2023 fantasy football. But before we could break down these wide receivers, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying these, please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you do leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter, please do so at NotoriousFantasy, and leave down below in the comment section before I actually start talking about my must-have wide receivers, who your number one must-have wide receiver is, that if you could realistically draft them in every single draft, you would. Let me know down below in the comment section. So without further ado, let's get into today's video. We begin with my first must-have wide receiver that you need for 2023 fantasy football, Cooper Kupp of the LA Rams, underdog ADP wide receiver 4 at pick 5.4. Now, it is important to note that Cooper Kupp is still dealing with that lingering hamstring injury from the beginning of August. I talk a lot on this channel about being very injury averse early on in your fantasy football draft, right? A player is coming into the season hurt. You probably should be very nervous to draft them. But every single report right now coming out of camp is that Cooper Kupp will be good to go by next week. Now we get to Wednesday next week and he's still not there. I start to sweat a little bit. I start to get nervous. If we hit Friday and he's still not back with the team, it is time to smash the glass in time of emergency, hit the red button, wee woo, panic time will ensue. But right now, I am not that worried. But again, that general rule of thumb is still very important. Try to avoid injuries in your fantasy football draft, because the injuries are going to find you and they are going to hit you in the leg like Tanya Harding with one of those big ass steel pipes or a baton, whatever she got whacked with. So Cooper Kupp, if he's back at training camp and practice by next week, wheels are up for a huge season. Wide receiver 1 in PPR points per game last year, and he was the wide receiver 23 in PPR because he only played in 9 games. Despite that, he had 98 targets, 10.9 per game, number 34, 75 receptions, 8.3 per game, number 23, 812 receiving yards, 90.2 per game, number 33, and 7 total touchdowns, 14th at wide receiver. It is straight up incredible that this man only played in 9 games and still finished as a top 24 wide receiver at the end of the season. He ranked 11th in target separation, 1st in dominator rating, and he only had 1 drop on the season. Cooper Kupp is one of the most lethal wide receivers in the NFL, and the LA Rams are devoid. They have absolutely no weapons really outside of Cooper Kupp. Sure, they have Van Jefferson, they have Puka, they have Tyler Higbee, right? That's all fine and dandy, but at the end of the day, this offense's focal point is Cooper Kupp. This offense moves as Cooper Kupp moves, and this is a guy that could legitimately average 12 targets per game. He has the upside to be the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy football, and in some drafts, he falls to pick 8 or 9. Again, put an asterisk in this, right? Be nervous if he doesn't show up next week to be with the Rams. But as of right now, based upon every report I have read, I feel very confident in drafting him right now because I think he'll be back with the team by next week. Next up, we move to Amon-Ra St. Brown of the Detroit Lions, underdog ADP wide receiver 8 at pick 13.3. This is another guy where there is not a lot of talent around him at the wide receiver position. Amon-Ra St. Brown, ever since breaking out at the end of the 2021 NFL season, has been bending defenses over the table as one of the most highest targeted wide receivers in the National Football League. Volume is king in fantasy football, especially in your half PPR, your full PPR leagues. You want guys that are going to see a lot of targets, and I think Cooper Kupp, I think Amon-Ra have the upside to both finish inside the top 3 at the target category. Last year, Amon-Ra was the wide receiver 7 in PPR and the wide receiver 11 in PPR points per game, despite the fact that people were avoiding Amon-Ra St. Brown because they were scared of, oh, maybe this is Fugazi. Maybe this is just a one season, end of the season shine in 2021. He can't do it on a full season sample size. Jared Goff this, Jared Goff that. Well, Amon-Ra St. Brown kicked the haters directly in the fucking teeth. They were left with a gap looking like Michael Strahan in their teeth. Again, Amon-Ra, wide receiver 7 in PPR last year, 11 in PPR points per game. He had 146 targets, 9.1 per game in 16 games. finishing 8th at wide receiver. 106 receptions, 6.6 per game, number 5. 1,161 receiving yards, 72.6 per game, number 10. 6 total touchdowns, 20th. 9th in target accuracy, 15th in true catch rate. Outside of Jameson Williams, there is not really a lot of weapons in this offense. Jameson Williams, reminder, suspended for the first 6 games of the season. Another reminder, Jameson Williams has been absolutely terrible in training camp. He can't hold on to the ball. Dan Campbell has even mentioned it. So if this guy's struggling now and he's out for the first 6 games and he comes back and he's not catching the ball, he's struggling. Now, do I think Jameson Williams is going to end up as an NFL bust? Fuck no, baby. But do I worry about the fact that maybe he comes back and it takes a couple of weeks, got to shake the rust off, and he's not looking great? Well, if that happens, Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to be sitting weekly with 10+ targets. Outside of Jameson Williams, this is a team with Khalif Raymond, Marvin Jones. They just cut the guy they brought in from the Jets. He is gone. Gonzo off of the team. Amon-Ra is going to see so much volume. Like I said, volume is king in fantasy football. And guess what? Jamal Williams is now gone. The touchdown king. And I get they brought in David Montgomery to do that, but what happens if Amon-Ra goes from just 6 touchdowns to maybe 8, 9, or 10? Then he has that upside to be a top 5 receiver in fantasy football. I am ecstatic to see this Detroit Lions offense this year, and I'm a huge fan of Amon-Ra St. Brown. At number 3, we have my guy Calvin Ridley of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Underdog ADP wide receiver 4 at pick 24.9. It feels like every single day people are getting higher and higher on Calvin Ridley. He's ranked as my wide receiver 12 this season. Calvin Ridley is in an amazing situation. They've got one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. They've got an upgraded coach from Urban Meyer to Doug Peterson, now the 2nd year of Doug Peterson, and Calvin Ridley has been pushed in a scenario to be the clear number 1 wide receiver. All reports out of training camp are that Calvin Ridley is turning heads. Calvin Ridley is dominating the Jaguars defense, making them look silly, and I think this guy is going to return to his former glory. Now, again, people are worried about rust, this, that, and the other thing, but there doesn't appear to be any rust with Calvin Ridley. His last season was 2021, but that was just 5 games, so we're going to Marty McFly this thing and go all the way back to 2020 for a closer representation of what he could do in a full season. This is in Atlanta with Julio Jones. Wide receiver 5 in PPR, wide receiver 4 in PPR points per game. And this was Julio Jones before he was washed, right? Before everyone was making fun of Julio Jones. This was still good Julio Jones, right? 15 games played in 2020, 7th in targets, 11th in receptions, 4th in receiving yards, and 9th in total touchdowns. 7th in yards per route run, 9th in fantasy points per route run, 21st in target separation. Now, he did struggle with dropping the football. He turned into Diontae Johnson. He had 9 drops, 3rd at wide receiver, but I am not worried about that at all. I am going to be able to select in the 3rd round. Now, I know an underdog, he goes at pick 24.9. This motherfucker falls into the 4th round of some redraft drafts. You might be able to get Calvin Ridley in the 4th round. Calvin Ridley is going to shock a lot of people because I've already seen the comments. I don't want to draft Calvin Ridley. He's a little old. He's this. He's that. He's not going to be as good as you think, Nick. Well, we'll see. Because I'm taking bets out heavily on Calvin Ridley, just like he was betting on the fucking Atlanta Falcons. I believe in a big way in Calvin Ridley. I believe in this Jaguars offense, and I believe he is going to be force-fed the rock. In Jacksonville at number 4, we move to Christian Watson of the Green Bay Packers, underdog ADP wide receiver 21 at pick 40.5. If you guys have enjoyed thus far, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button down below. Wide receiver 40 in PPR last year, 33 in PPR points per game, tied with guys like Wiki, DJ Moore, McCole Hardman, and Allen Lazard. Though, when you just take into account games where he played over 60% of the snaps, he was the wide receiver 8 in PPR, which is a 7-game sample size. Now, again, his stats on paper, they're not orgasmic. You don't read them, you don't hear them, and you don't think, oh, I need to draft this guy, right? 14 games played with 11 starts. He was 65th in targets, 64th in receptions, 52nd in receiving yards, and 4th in total touchdowns, 7th in true catch rate, and a 7.4 target accuracy rating, 41st. A lot of people are fading Christian Watson because one, they probably faded Amon-Ra St. Brown last year because they saw this great wide receiver and they're worried about the quarterback. They think it's Fugazi. They worry about he's just a one-year wonder Peyton Hillis. Jordan Love is going to be better than people think. And Jordan Love doesn't need to be Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Joe Shiesty, Joe Burrow for Christian Watson to succeed. Reports yesterday out of camp, Christian Watson jumped so high, he touched the fucking sky like that Kanye West song. Christian Watson is going to be good in Green Bay. You better believe it. He is the clear number one target in this offense. He is a red zone threat. He is a dominator, 50 Shades of Grey style in the red zone. This is an offense that is severely underpriced because everyone and their mother is scared of Jordan Love. Again, Jordan Love doesn't need to be amazing for Watson to succeed. Watson succeeded with a withered down version of Mr. Discount Double Check Ron Rodgers last season. Sure, they have Jaden Reed, they have Romeo Doubs, but none of those guys can hold Christian Watson's jockstrap. He's the clear number one on this team, and I think he easily outperforms his ADP of wide receiver number 21. At number 5, we have Wiki DJ Moore of the Chicago Bears. Current underdog ADP wide receiver 22 at pick 41. Last year he was the wide receiver 24 in PPR and the wide receiver 33 in PPR points per game, tied with Watson, Lazard, and Mecole Hardman. Now, DJ Moore, I've talked about this a bunch, has been rinsed by his quarterbacks. DJ Moore has played with XFL legend PJ Walker. He's played with Mono Man Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield. He's played with Cam Newton after Cam Newton was in his prime, right? He played with, instead of Super Cam, it was Mid Cam or even under Mid Cam, right? He was fucking awful towards the end of those years in Carolina. He was banged up, but DJ Moore has still looked really good. He has looked incredible. He was 5th in Dominator rating last year, receivers, percentage of team total receiving yards, and team receiving touchdowns. But he had a 6.3 target accuracy rating, 97th at wide receiver. Again, the quarterback has been an anchor tied to the legs of DJ Moore. They throw some rocks on him and throw him in the fucking river like he's Luca Brasi sleeping with the fishes, right? His quarterbacks have bent him over a table, but this is the year where every single thing changes. We saw in the first preseason game, DJ Moore caught a ball that was behind the line of scrimmage and took it 70 yards to the house. Now, maybe it was actually like 55 yards. The yards don't matter. You get the fucking point. This guy looked good on that one throw from Justin Fields. Justin Fields is a significantly better quarterback than any of the absolute scrubs that have gotten the courtesy to throw the ball to a receiver as great as DJ Moore. I believe heavily in Justin Fields' passing prowess. Coming out of the Ohio State, everyone's talking about it. This guy's surgical on the field. He's dicing the defense up, like using one of those techniques that those pro chefs use where they like put their fingers out like this and they go with the super sharp knife, right? I would never do that. I'd cut my fucking finger off. I'd look like Jason Pierre-Paul after that. But DJ Moore now has a competent quarterback. He is going to be peppered with targets. I know, Nick, the Bears aren't going to throw the ball that much, Nick. They're not going to be able to support DJ Moore. They're going to throw the ball to DJ Moore. Maybe Chase Claypool and Darnell Mooney end up sucking ass, but they're going to feed DJ Moore. They've got a better offensive line. They're going to have Justin Fields looking better, throwing the rock. DJ Moore's got it. He's got the skills. 21st in targets, 37th in receptions, 26th in receiving yards, and 14th in total touchdowns. I believe with a semi-competent quarterback, just anything better than what he's had in the past, Moore is in a perfect situation. I believe heavily in the talent. I've been drafting this guy for years because I thought he was so good that he'd be able to carry these shitty quarterbacks. Now, he's on a team with a quarterback that isn't awful. And now is the time for DJ Moore to shine. People will fade him. They'll say, Nick, I've drafted DJ Moore X amount of years. He keeps screwing me over. Well, don't jump off the bandwagon just yet because it's DJ Moore season in Chicago. Moving next to Diontae Johnson of the Pittsburgh Steelers, underdog ADP, wide receiver 29 at pick 55.2. Shout out to the fantasy footballers. But before we talk more about Diontae Johnson and the rest of these wide receivers, I would like to give you guys a quick word from our friends and our sponsor over at Underdog Fantasy. This Sunday, I will be doing an Underdog Fantasy draft extravaganza from 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on. We're going to go for like 10 or 12 hours doing drafts, answering questions, have a bunch of guests. Make sure you guys join up, and make sure you're signed up to Underdog Fantasy. If you are new, Use promo code Notorious for a first match deposit bonus of up to $100. Deposit 100, get an additional 150, additional 50, 25, additional 25. The minimum deposit is $10, and you'll be able to draft with me on Sunday. The Puppy 3 is their brand new tournament. $5 to enter, 150 max entries, $200,000 to first, $1 million in total prizes. They also have the biggest fantasy football contest ever. It is $25 to enter, 150 max entries, $3 million to first, $15 million in total prizes. Now, if you don't know what best ball is, that's what Underdog is. It's a best ball platform. It's the best part about fantasy. It's the draft. You draft your team, that's it. You don't have to do trades, because there's no trades, there's no waivers, and there's no editing your lineup. At the end of every single week, Underdog automatically throws the highest scores into your lineup for you. So if that sounds fun to you, make sure you check it out. And they also have things that aren't just tournaments. They have these games that are called basically sit and goes. It's like a regular league. You draft your team against 11 other people with as low of a buy-in as $3, and the first 2 places make money. So make sure you guys check that out. Again, Underdog Fantasy, promo code Notorious for that first match deposit bonus, or click on the link in the video description. Coming back to Diontae Johnson here, another guy where volume is king in fantasy football. I know George Pickens makes the pizzazz plays, those cool plays that make the ESPN da-da-da-da-da, or that was not the ba-da-da. What the fuck? Do I not know how to do it anymore? I haven't watched SportsCenter in a while. Da-da-da-da-da. That's definitely not it. What is it? That just shows how far SportsCenter has fallen. It's da-da-da, da-da-da. That's the sound. So I feel like a fucking idiot. People are going to think I'm a buffoon for not knowing that one. But Diontae Johnson is going to be the number 1 target. The offensive line's better. Kenny Pickett has looked better. And Diontae Johnson was one of the best receivers last year, in my opinion. Targets, top 6. Receptions, number 13. Receiving yards, number 27, but he scored no touchdowns. So that catapulted him into sadness for fantasy football, right? If you had him, you felt terrible. Wide receiver 28 PPR, wide receiver 43 in PPR points per game. But the problem was, you felt like you always had to start him because it felt like a fluke, right? He has no touchdowns halfway into the season. He's bound to score more touchdowns. He's going to just jump up and score 6 touchdowns in the last couple of games. And then it's a couple games later, he still doesn't have any touchdowns. And then maybe you make it to the championship with Diontae Johnson on your team. You're like, you know what? This is the game where he scores a touchdown. I was even betting on Diontae Johnson to score touchdowns last season because it felt so impossible for him to have scored as many touchdowns as he scored in his career and just be invisible in the end zone to Kenny Pickett. This is a guy that in terms of touchdown production over his career, in his rookie year, he had 5. 2020, 7. 2021, 8. And last year, 17 games played, 0. Zilch. He was 11th in total route win rate. In total route wins. He was 4th in juke rate. He was 2nd in unrealized air yards because the accuracy wasn't there from Kissing Titties, Mitchell Trubisky, and Kenny Pickett. So if Kenny Pickett steps things up here in his sophomore season, and Diontae Johnson is still the number 1 guy, which is very clear to me, he's going to be the number 1 target, then this is sugar, spice, and everything nice, like the fucking Powerpuff Girls, for Diontae Johnson to have a big bounce-back season. Moving now to wide receiver number 7, Jordan Addison Ray. I want a bad bitch. Jordan Addison Ray, wide receiver of the Minnesota Vikings, current Underdog ADP wide receiver 37 at pick 70.6. Jordan Addison currently dealing with a concussion. Definitely different than having a hamstring injury or something like that. He's going to be back with the team very soon. I don't worry about that at all. Obviously, Jordan Addison is going to be the number 2 receiver on this team. He has first-round draft capital. I know the first depth chart has KJ Osborne listed in front of Jordan Addison, but that's not going to be the case. Jordan Addison is going to be the number 2. Kirk Cousins is way better than people think. I hate that I have to say this in every single video, but everyone seems to think Kirk Cousins sucks absolute donkey cock at being an NFL quarterback. Thielen last year, Jordan Addison's going to be in that role, had a 7.9 target accuracy rating, which was 12th. And again, Adam Thielen is gone in Carolina. Adam Thielen ran 621 routes in 2022, which is 36.5 per game, ranking 2nd at wide receiver. This is a team that has to throw the ball because their defense is bottom of the shelf. The defense is atrocious. They are getting just their doonies beat down late in the game, and then the offense has to keep throwing. Back in the day, not even really back in the day, just a couple years ago, this was a team that ran the ball a lot, churn the rock, run with Dalvin Cook, mitigate the mistakes that Kirk Chains could make, put him in some bubble wrap, don't let him fuck things up. But now this offense is centered around Kirk Cousins throwing the rock at a really high rate every single game. Now, he's not the biggest guy on earth, 5'11", 173 pounds, but with how good this Vikings offense looked last year, I really like this landing spot for him. Last year at USC, just 20 years old, 11 games played, 49 receptions on 84 targets, 875 receiving yards, 14.8 yards per reception, 8 receiving touchdowns. He had a 16.3% target share and a 70.2% catch rate. I think that both Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen, obviously Justin Jefferson is going to finish pretty high if he's healthy. I think both these guys could work symbiotically, work together, and both finish inside of the top 24. And honestly, I think Addison could finish as high as like wide receiver 18 in this offense, 15, 16, maybe even 14 in this offense. I'm a huge fan of Jordan Addison, the talent coming out of USC. Again, I'm chasing the volume in the Minnesota Vikings offense, which is super important in half PPR and full PPR. I think Jordan Addison is going to surprise a lot of people. His speed is unreal, and in that first preseason game, I've talked about this a bunch, he made a catch where he looked like Michael Jackson. You know when Michael Jackson does the hee-hee, and he like leans forward on his toes like that? That's what Jordan Addison did, toe tapping on the sideline. Now, the ref was as blind as Stevie Wonder, and they didn't give him a catch, but we all know deep down that he caught that. Anyone who saw the replay knew that he caught that. Moving to number 8, Elijah Moore of the Cleveland Browns, underdog ADP, wide receiver 43 at pick 87.4. A reporter even asked Elijah Moore about his fantasy football season that he is going to have, and he said that you need to draft him. Like those old commercials. You remember those old NFL commercials? Draft me, where the one guy that was on Washington, fucking, I don't even remember who it was, just threw his hand through a brick wall and caught the pass, right? Draft me. If you've never seen those videos, go back and watch them. One of the kickers was kicking at a bell on top of a church. It was obviously fake. It was fugazi, it was a wazi, it was a woozy, but it was very fun to watch. If you've never seen those, make sure you watch them. They're very funny. And if you were watching football back then, even cooler. So Elijah Moore believes in himself, as he should. He has been drugged through the mud by the Jets. He got drafted by the Jets, right? You're destined for failure when you join the Jets, but now he's gone. Now he does have another stink on him. He's part of the Cleveland Browns, but they traded a second-round pick in exchange for Moore and a third-round pick. Last year, his stats were so unimpressive, I don't even think there's really a reason to read them. But I will. 16 games played with 6 starts. 63rd in targets, 72nd in receptions, 73rd in receiving yards, 105th in total touchdowns. He was getting the ball so little that he fucking requested a trade last year. And this wasn't some like Terrell Owens diva shit, right? Or Chad Ochocinco. This was just, I don't want anything to do with the Jets. They're not giving me the ball. I want the ball. Our offense sucks ass. Give me the football. And they just weren't giving him the rock. So he requests a trade, and now he is in Cleveland. So if you look further than just his regular stats, 5th in true catch rate, 12th in target separation, and 25th in route win rate, with a 93rd target accuracy. 93rd. That is terrible. The quarterbacks in New York last year were dog shit. I know, people don't love Deshaun Watson. Elijah Moore is going to be used gadget-wise. They're going to give him carries. We already saw that in the preseason game. Now, I'm not saying this guy's the second coming of Deebo Samuel or something, because they have 9-inch Nicholas Chubb, who they're going to feed the rock to as well, but I'm a big fan of this Cleveland Browns offense. I really heavily believe in a bounce back with Watson this year, and I want Elijah Moore late. He's clearly, to me, the number 2 receiver ahead of DPJ, Tillman, all these other guys that they have on the team. Moving now to my number 9 must-have wide receiver, and this is where people click off the video, right? They watch for around 20 minutes, and they're like, Nick, you had me until you said Michael Thomas. Or, yeah, people will be like, Nick, I get it with Michael Thomas, but I'm not drafting him. I would get that, too, if Michael Thomas was coming off the board in the 5th round. But he's not. He's wide receiver 47, pick 96. Sometimes he falls to like the 11th round because it's like a game of hot potato. Everyone's just passing him around. Hey, I don't want to draft him. I don't want to draft him. I don't want to draft him. And then eventually, it just feels like, I get he hasn't been healthy. I get that he stubs his toe entering the team plane to go fly to the game and he's out for the season. I get that. I get not chasing injuries. But you are so late in the draft that you can take a shot on a guy that I legitimately think, if everything goes right, if push comes to shove and Thomas stays healthy for like 14 games, he will end up being a league winner. He was the wide receiver 117 in PPR last year, but he was the wide receiver 9 in PPR points per game. He played 3 games, had 3 starts, missed the final 14 games of the season with a dislocated toe because he probably stubbed it walking into the stadium. 22 targets, not very high, right? But he only played in 3 games, so 7.3 targets per game, 16 receptions, 5.3 per game. 171 receiving yards, 57 per game, and 3 total touchdowns. Since he only played in 3 games, he doesn't qualify for any efficiency stats. 2 out of the 3 games he played last season, he was a top 18 wide receiver. And I get that 2020 to 2022 has been a dumpster fire for Michael Thomas's career. But if you remember, the 4 years prior to that, he ripped off 4 straight seasons as a top 8 wide receiver in points per game. Now, I get it. There's a stink around Michael Thomas. I get it. People don't want to draft Slant Man. I get it. I get it. But at the end of the day, when I am that deep in my draft, why not take a shot on a guy that will hit as a literal top 12 option weekly? Why would you not do that? I get there's other options back there that are safer, right? The wide receiver 2 on this team, the wide receiver 3 on this team, right? That you could reasonably talk yourself into starting, right? One of these Kansas City receivers. And I love the Chiefs receivers outside of Kadarius Toney. But let's be honest. Sky Moore hits. He's not wide receiver 12 on the season. He's just not. Mahomes spreads the ball out too much to do that. But Michael Thomas, with Derek Carr, who locks into a receiver during the game, just literally watches him the whole fucking game. Derek Carr, who has produced great wide receivers for fantasy football. I know. Nick, they have Chris Olave. I get it. I do. I'm down on my knee. But I believe in Michael Thomas. I just do. There's something telling me that Michael Thomas, if he stays healthy, now again, there's a huge if. A huge if. If he stays healthy, he is going to shock everyone. He's going to shock the world. So I'm drafting him this year. Fuck it. I'm just going to do it. I'm going to just be risky. Again, early on fantasy drafts, be risk averse. Later in drafts, rip the condom off. Be risky, baby. Going raw. Number 10, Rashod, Master, Bateman, underdog ADP, wide receiver 48, pick 97.9 of the Baltimore Ravens, wide receiver 111 last year in PPR, and 58 in PPR points per game, though he was a top 32 wide receiver in points per game when playing over 60% of the snaps, which is a 3-game sample size. Last year was an injury-ridden season for Rashod Bateman. Now, when it comes to Bateman, this is a guy that on a week-to-week basis, you probably are not ever going to know actually when to start him, but he's one of these guys that I do like to target because of that quote-unquote, what I like to call firecracker upside. You throw him in your lineup, maybe you get JPP'd and the firecracker fucking explodes and you leave the game with less fingers, right? Or it's super cool, right? They explode, and they explode money shot on your opponent's face. Now, Bateman's not going to be, he's going to not be consistent. I already know that. But he's got that big play upside on an offense that I think is going to throw the ball more under Todd Monken. Now, I think Flowers, Bateman, Odell, 2 out of 3 of those guys are going to be incredible for fantasy. They're going to have those huge boom games, and one of them is going to end up just awful. Flopping like a fish, right out of water. And I think, to be honest, I like Odell, but I think that guy's going to be Odell that ends up as the bust. Bateman, I get the injury risk, but again, I know I talk about not chasing injuries, but Bateman's not injured right now. He's back from that injury. He's healthy. And later in the draft, I'm fine taking the more injury risk players because if Bateman sucks, he gets hurt. It is what it is, right? You drafted him so late, you can just cut him. You can cut bait, and you don't feel bad about it. When you draft someone in the 3rd round, and then they're this injury risk. Or, for instance, if Cooper Kupp isn't back at camp next week, and you draft Cooper Kupp in the 1st round, and he doesn't come back for weeks, then it's time to be very nervous, right? You got to panic because you ain't cutting him. You can't cut him. He's just sitting on your bench, burning a hole in your pocket. But with a guy like Bateman who goes super late with that big upside, you don't feel as bad cutting him. So thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know down below in the comment section who your number one must-have wide receiver is for 2023 fantasy football. Let me know in the comments. I love you guys all so much. Again, we'll be live on Sunday. Bunch of guests, Underdog Fantasy, Draft-a-Palooza. Have a great one. I love you guys. Deep down, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. Have a great one. And as always, good.